All right, your exam review packet needs to come with you on the day of the exam. I just said this in class, but I'm going to say it again. Work through anything. If I make notes about definitions or notations on this exam review, you should be too. I know the numbering is strange, but we're going to follow along together and just go page by page, so there shouldn't be any real issues in terms of where you find what. If you have questions, ask. First one, finding the length of x to y. X to y is just going to be putting together x to z, and I'm going to ask you guys to jot this down because this notation says x to y. Say it again.
18.
It is 18. Right, I know the answer is 18 by looking. I'm going to point out again that I'm going to be using notations and things that are relevant to you guys having like the ability to write these things down. The answer being 18 is true, seems really easy. Can you jot down the notations that go along with put these two segments together to get the length of the whole segment? So, of course, we're always talking about how in high school geometry there's probably more to it than just putting together 6 and 12. So make sure that you're comfortable with the segment notation over the tops of the two endpoints. Go ahead. Sure. Would you hit one of those lights over there, Tony? Give another name for plane R. Now, a couple things about this. Kicking back right now and just like, oh, plane R, you know. Again, I want to remind you guys that anything I'm writing here is relevant to the knowledge you need to have going into this exam. The only reason we can call this plane R is because plane R is the single letter that's hanging out there that doesn't have a point next to it. So if I see a letter with no point next to it, that's what the plane name, letter with no point. That's the plane name. That's one way to name planes. The other way to name planes is to use 3 letters that are contained in the plane that relate to points in the plane. So you've got a letter with no point, and you can use that single one to name a plane, or you need to use 3 points in the plane. And so appropriate answers for another name for plane R, I could call it plane, and I'm actually putting the word out there, ONS. Or I could call it, well, you guys tell me, what would be another combination of just 3 letters in the plane? Nothing. Say it again. OUS. Sure. You could use SQU, sure. Others? So put the word plane out in front of it. If it doesn't have a point next to it, you can use that single letter. But the one thing I want to caution you with here is, if I'm going to name using 3 points, R can't be one of them because R is not a point. R can't be one because R is not a point. Second one, name a line that intersects the plane. When we're naming lines, we need to use 2 points and we need to use the correct notation. The only line that I see that's intersecting this plane is this one that must be going through it, kind of down through the middle of it, and we're going to name that. You can name that. There's only 3 ways you could name that line. You can name it line, notice my notation, MN, or you can name it line MP, or you can name it line NP. To name a line, you use 2 points on it and the correct notation over the top of it. Your notation matters, and notation will be graded for accuracy. 2 rays. There's only 2 rays, and they happen to be along that line we were just talking about. There is only 2 rays. The 2 rays start at point N. I think, Dominique, you said something about opposite rays the other day in class. And these guys, actually, the 2 rays that are in this plane, N to M, with the correct notation, and N to P with the correct notation. Nope, you have to go in the correct direction, and the end point has to come first, even if it is going to the left. And those guys are also opposite rays because they share an endpoint. So those are 2 rays, but they're also considered opposite rays because they share an endpoint. Also opposite rays as they share an endpoint. Go ahead.
Why do I need QT count?
You know what? QT would work. You'd have to name, she found one. QT would work. What did you put with QT?
I put QT with the right sign above it.
But what's the other one? Because you needed to name two.
Oh, and I put N.
You put Ray and M, sure. So you could put together QT with NM, or you could put, sorry, I missed that one. You could put QT together with NM, or you could put QT together with NP. Either one of those pairs would be fine too. I missed it. Good eye. Is that what somebody else had their arm up for?
Yes.
Okay. Name a point on plane R. This is probably the easiest one out of all of them. We could name S, O, N, Q, U. Any of these. Notice R is not there. R is the single letter that was intended to name the plane. Cool. Yeah. Oh. Number 6 and 7, I had worked through this. I think this was with you guys, actually. I put the endpoint, or the midpoint formula. I put the midpoint formula up on here. Find the coordinates of the midpoint. So for number 6, and if you have any paper that you've done this work on and have it attached, just make sure it's stapled to it to hand to me when you walk in on Wednesday for the final, or Thursday or Friday, whenever yours is. So the midpoint here, if I have, so I've got an x1 and a y1, x2 and a y2. My midpoint formula gets me doing 2 calculations. I'm going to put my stuff for x's on the left, the stuff for y's here. For the midpoint, it's going to be -1 plus -2, all divided by 2. The y values would be 9 and 5, all divided by 2. And I'm just kind of working down. This is -3 over 2. This is 14 over 2. So -1.5 and 7 would be the midpoint of those two. -1.5 and 7 for number 6. Number 7, yeah. -1 plus -2. That's how I got -3. Making some corrections on that one. Well, there's a plus sign between them, so it's -1 plus -2. So it's -1 minus 2, which is still -3. So if you go on your calculator, you can look at it 2 ways. -1 plus -2. You're going to get -3. If you don't like that idea of plus negative, I just wrote it by what the formula was. Yes, this right here could turn into a subtraction. -1 minus 2 is still going to produce -3. So 2 negatives together would make an addition problem. This is plus 1 negative, so it's a subtraction problem. I think that's really what it's getting down to here. Now number 7, we got x1, y1, x2, y2. So same setup, and I'm looking at this formula here. My x's 12 plus, here you go, right here again, 12 plus -3, it's the same as 12 minus 3. That's going to be up in the numerator. For the y values, -5 plus 2 all over 2. Coming down here, 12 plus -3 is the same as 12 minus 3. It's 9 over 2. -5 plus 2 is going to give me -3 over 2. And then those, if you go and divide them out, this is 4.5 and -1.5. If you have them as decimals, that's fine too. Now, when we go into number 8 and 9, they give you one of the endpoints and the midpoint, and you've got to find the other endpoint. So I had started doing this on my page, but I'm going to work it all out like fresh right here. So I know that the midpoint is sitting at 5/2 and 1, and I know that one of the endpoints is -2 and -3. So when it comes to the x values, it's -2 plus some missing x value divided by 2. And when I do that math, this is going to produce 5/2 because they gave me the endpoint. So when I look at these x values, this is going to produce 5/2. They gave me the endpoint. Now I'm going to go do it on the y's as well. I'm just going to switch colors just because I'm going to separate these problems out in a second. They gave me one of the endpoints was -3. I need to find the y value of the other endpoint. And what I know about this problem is that when I do this math, that equals 1. Because in the end, they told me that this is the midpoint. Now, if that's the case, then I really am looking at having two different problems to solve here. And so I've got to figure out what x2 value gives me. What's the x2 value that gives me 5/2 for the endpoint? And then what's the y2 value that gives me 1 for the midpoint? So let me go over and just do this problem here. -2 plus x2 divided by 2 is going to give me 5/2. 5/2. And then I undo divide by 2 by multiplying both sides by 2. These cancel out. -2 plus x sub 2 is equal to, this is going to be 5. These 2's will cancel out here. Then I'm going to add 2 to both sides and find out that the missing x value has got to be 7. Yeah.
I didn't do all of that. You can just look at it and see that.
Well, not everybody can just look, so we'll go through the formal process. And you know, here's the thing: if I had decimal numbers or fractions in here, looking wouldn't be, that strategy's not going to get you through. Like, I can look and figure it out myself too, but that strategy's not going to work for everything. So then for this other midpoint, -3 plus y2 all over 2 has got to be equal to 1. And I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 again. These are going to cancel out. -3 plus y2 equals 2. When I add 3 to both sides, I find out that y sub 2 is 5. Y sub 2 is 5. So the missing point that we didn't have in this problem is 7, 5. So the answer to this problem is 7, 5. Did you just look at it and get it? Good. Well, that means that it's something that you got down and you can make it easy. I don't know if everybody's in the same boat. So number 9, setting it up the same way. In number 9, I know the midpoint is -1 and -3, or I'm sorry, -1 and +3. The question is, how do I get there? There you go. -4 plus x2 divided by 2 is going to get me to this -1. 1 plus y2 divided by 2 is going to get me to this 3. And let's see, can we actually figure out what this would have to be? What number has to be up top here? Divided by 2. And this is kind of getting at what Selena was saying, how you could look at it. What number would have to be up top here that when I divide it by 2, I get -1? You know, if you can look at it and do it, nobody's answering me that question. -4 plus x2 over 2 equals -1. If I multiply both sides by 2, -4 plus this missing x2 is -2. Add 4 to both sides. X sub 2 is 2. If you don't have the ability to communicate your thinking, you got to be able to show your thoughts by the work process. Then in the second one, 1 plus y2 all divided by 2 is 3. I'm thinking you guys should be able to see this. What number divided by 2 would give me 3? 6. So this top has to be 6. So y2 would be, it would have to be 5. So then your missing xy pair is 2, 5. Let's go on to the next crowd. So this one, the other missing endpoint is 2, 5. Name 3 points. The only 2 that you can't put here, there's 2 that you can't have that are in this figure. You can't put a C, you can't put an H. Those aren't points. Those are plain names. You can't put a C, you can't put an H. Those are plain names. So you can have either E, D, F, A, B, and G. And I can't have H or C because H and C are the plain names. They don't have a point, and you can't use those. Those are the names of the planes. Now, naming two lines, paying close attention to notation. You can tell me FE if you don't use the correct notation over the top. You're dead in the water. FE, line AB. You could write EF, line EF. You could write line BA. Those would work. Unlike that first drawing, we had a line that had 3 points on it. These only have 2, so the only way that you can write them is just using those 2. Okay, so number 1 was name 3 points. Any of these? Number 3, I'm sorry. The only thing that should be happening right now is that you're looking at your own test. Name all points in plane H. F, E, and D. Good. We took out that H now that we realize that's the name of it. F, E, and D. Name the plane that contains A, B, G. Going to put the word plane, and we're going to use that single letter because it's there for us. That's fine. Put commas between them, so I don't think you're naming a plane. Yep. Yep, you can have these in any order. Put commas between them so I don't think you're naming a plane. Opposite rays, again, share an endpoint. Opposite rays share an endpoint. I'm hearing CE is not going to work. Rays are, there we go. Ray, EC, and ray ED, that's one pair. Or you could have ray EG and ray EF. So either this pair or this pair. You didn't have to have both. It said name one pair. Number 6, name 2 points that are collinear. With point D, the only other 2 points that are on the line that includes point D would be C and E. Make sure that you're putting a comma or you're putting the word and in between them. No other way to look at that. Name the point of intersection of line CD with plane A, E. No, the only answer is E. Where does this line intersect the plane? Say it again. 8. Name a point that is not coplanar. Nope, G is on it. It's either C or D. You didn't need both. So moving on to 6, make sure that you could say, yup, Miss Petticord, segment KM, because what if I don't care about the answer being 8 and I want you to write it, is equal to segment KL plus segment LM. And KM, segment KM is equal to segment KL plus KLM. That one's 21. And then same thing, segment KM is equal to segment KL plus segment LM, and that one is 17. So notation, notation, notation. That wraps up the chapter 1 work.